Now, a lot of people will think I'm completely mad and slightly angered to this video. Some others are going to think, why have I done it again? This is my 1998 latest purchase, I should say, Vectra V. It's a 2 litre DI with 88 brake horsepower in jungle green of all colours. But to be fair, when it is clean, it is a nice looking car, so I can't really say anything bad about it. So let's go and have a look and see what I've just spent £760 on. Now, with time in trying to keep this video as brief as possible, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my latest purchase, the Vectra. It is, like I say, it is a DL 16 valve 2 litre DI, not the DTI. The DTI was more well known in the facelift versions of this. This is the pre-facelift variant. So this engine is chain driven. It's not very fast, but it's suits the purpose, should we say. Ignore the fact I've left me phone mount on top of the car. I shall go and move that quickly. So with the power of editing, that is gone, and this is a 5-speed diesel, which means it is only a single mass clutch on this one, so it's not too heavy, but also means if I need to change the clutch at some point, it won't be too expensive to really replace in comparison to the dual mass my Insignia currently had replaced. It is the ABS model, so it does have ABS, one thing Fiumin the Corsa never actually had. And yes guys, this is Fiumin's replacement. However, I do plan on fixing this car up and potentially selling it on to make a bit of profit out of it. But there are a couple of things I need doing to it, except one thing. With Vauxhalls, they commonly rust in multiple places, and this car is no exception, sort of, apart from behind here, because in here it's perfection. There is not an ounce of rust in there, even under its little rubber seal. It's immaculate. And when I picked this car up about 2-3 weeks ago, it was sat under a tree covered in tree sap. It had Bowles tyres on it, which is the reason why Fiumin's wheels are on the car currently, because Fiumin had brand new tyres fitted to it before the engine decided to give way. So luckily enough, the car was already set up for 4 studs, so these are 4 stud wheels, hence the replacement, and the wheels are now on Gordon. Yes, I've given the car a name. If you haven't already seen with the reg ends in GAW, and coincidentally it's green, so I've called it Gordon. I mean, it's a manly car, it's a manly engine, so Gordon, why not? Now, be kind to me if you will. When I mention that this car has common rust issues, this corner and the opposite corner also have the same problem as what Fiumin did. If you remember, we actually had to weld the corners here on Fiumin because it had a hole in it, and this car is no exception. There are holes on this side and on the offside as well. So, I should say near side, but yeah, whatever. But it's common for them to rust here. I've already had a quote between £250 and £300 to get that fixed, so once that's done, he's also going to clean up this bit too, which is also surface rust, and once that's all cleaned up, the car should look a million times better. And you can tell it's been owned by an older person because the mud flaps are actually held on by what look like metal brackets, and I can see where the screws are, and I can't even determine whether they are screws anymore. But with the rust here, if I open the door, none of that is interfered here, so nice and solid, and the interior is just immaculate. Now another benefit I find with this era of Vectra is, just like the Corsa, glass headlights, so they're not going to go foggy or anything like that in future. It is a mechanical fuel pump engine, this car, so it could run on oil or vegetable oil or cooking oil or absolutely anything. But it is proper retro. It is just a proper car. Underneath, on top, it's just a proper car. And it's got all the features that newer cars like my Insignia don't even have, including in your washer filler cap, you have a dipstick to show you how full or how empty your wash fluid is, which of course mine is about half full. But I also mention this as well, it is a 25-year-old car and its original bonnet struts work perfectly fine and they're not even weak. Bit stiff, but they work, you know. But it's clean underneath. I mean, it needs a couple of bits of TLC. This radiator is slightly loose, but it doesn't actually affect it. It gets up to temperature fine, it cools itself down fine. Top mounts are perfect. The engine is full of oil, and you can see it because it's a typical diesel fashion. It's all over the engine and not necessarily inside it. So we've got oil on the side here and on the side here. I dread to think what it would be like if I was to take that off, but I'm sure we will do at some point. But I can't grovel with it. This is a £760 car, and with the way it sounds and the way it starts and the way it drives, I love it. I think it is a total upgrade from the Corsa, and I think the Corsa, the end is nigh. Now otherwise, condition wise, the wheels need a clean up. I mean, these are the wheels from the Corsa, but mainly the one thing that lets it down is the mirrors. Now the mirrors, as you can see here, it's actually delaminated. It has started over on the other side, but I accidentally met a friend of mine, I met a friend of mine who I accidentally met at work. I had my Insignia at the time. I didn't have my Corsa there, but I was talking to him. He pulled up in a nice white Cavalier, and he says he's got one of these breaking as an estate, and I mentioned my plans to what I'm going to do with the car, and he says he actually got a set of these in this same colour, primarily this one, for 15 quid, which I think is just going to make the car look a lot better without having to pay money to get this resprayed. I mean, it's only plastic, so this I'm sure only clips off, and then there's a couple of screws, that all comes off, and hey presto, you've got yourself a new mirror. So that's it, and they're not electrical mirrors either, they're manuals, so it makes it even easier to replace. So simple is always better. Nothing has to be too complicated anymore. You've got a car here that's 25 years old and will still carry on its day. It's only done 123,000 miles, whereas a new car could break it less than that. I mean, put it this way, my Insignia is only 5 years old. Anyway, now I also got this car in case I needed a spare. So when I say I needed a spare, if my Insignia ever was to throw a wobbler again, I know at least this would get me to A to B, where I want to be, and with it being diesel, relatively reliable. But the boot again suffers from a little bit of rust, and that's down to this seal drying out. Now this isn't too difficult to fix, it's a case of just taking off the wiper. I could do it myself, clean this up a bit, protect it, put a better seal on there, and that should clean it up for what the car's purpose is. It prevents the boot from needing replacing, which means these badges can stay happy and lowery for all the time. The reg plates will probably need changing, that is a given, because they are starting to delaminate. The front one doesn't even have it doesn't have an area code or a postcode or anything on it, so that needs changing. But the boot is massive, and you've got a split fold parcel shelf which works, and it works pretty dang well actually. But it did have 5 Harmony tyres on it, and Harmony tyres weren't really cheap, but it had initially, I've got a photo of it which I'll show you, 14-inch Steelies on this car, and all the tyres, well, the front tyres were bald, the rear ones are cracked, the Space Saver in here also had cracked tyre, So I've replaced all 5 wheels with the Tigra alloys the Corsa had, and I've put all 5 Steelies on the Corsa before it went. So that just means the Corsa could still move and get onto a trailer to wherever it needed to be. Whereas this car, well, it needed new tyres. So rather than spending loads of money on tyres, I just put wheels on. Bob's your uncle. I've got rid of the Steelies that looked horrendous, and I've put some nice alloys on which make the car look a lot better, I think. Right then, let's go for a mooch. Okay, let's go. Let's close that window. There we are. There we go. Close this window as well. I've got to be careful with this window because the tracks are a bit funny. So the window tilts a bit, and it does have that anti-trap finger thing which drops the window down if it gets jammed with anything. So, what do I think about this plucky little Survivor? Foot down, and you hear that tiny little turbo working away. Let's turn that off. The only downside with owning an older car such as this is it's got no aircon whatsoever. All it's got is a fan and a sunroof. It was optioned as either sunroof or aircon back then, and the owner of the vehicle chose to have a sunroof instead of aircon, which is a very brave move, I think. But then for a car of its era, and the fact that we live in Britain as well, when are we going to use aircon that much? But in today's weather, at 28 degrees according to the car, oh yeah, we need it. We need it indeed. But it drives nicely. It's nice and floaty. It reminds me a lot of how the Corsa was as standard. I have to close this window, I can't hear myself. It is quite a noisy car, mainly from its engine, but also from the tyres, I think, too. But it's a manual gearbox as well, which is another benefit to the Corsa that I had. And it's just a solid little runner, and that little tiny turbo whistling away. It's such a nostalgic car. My dad used to have one of these, although it was a 1.8 when I was born. It was a goldish bronzy colour that he had, but with this being diesel, it's great on the fuel. Honestly, it's, for its age, it's not as good as the Insignia, but then I didn't expect it to be like that. The only killer with the deal of this car was the tax. Now, because it's a mechanical fuel pump and it's an older diesel, the government don't like older diesels, so it's £29 a month for taxing a car, whereas the Insignia is £15 a month. But the year before the Insignia, when it was like free tax or whatever, it's £20 a year. I really don't get the taxing system on the cars, really. I mean, you'd think the newer cars would be better for tax than the older cars were, and I suppose they've got it wrong, and oh well, it is what it is. Now, there are a few issues, tedious issues I may say, with the car. One of them, this mirror. I need to get something to make that stick a little better, because this mirror, it moves way too easily. So if you accelerate too hard or you brake too hard, the mirror always moves too. Secondly, these door handles, the rubbers have perished on them, so me and Sarah, we've peeled them off because they were just crumbling in our hands. It was horrible, so we've just got the plastic outlays of it. What else? Oh yes, the steering needs realignment. For whatever reason, it's pointed that way. The steering wheel, the horns are a bit iffy. I mean, the horn on the right hand side of the steering wheel is fine. The one on the left is probably the one that's been used the most. I'm guessing whoever owned this before me was very horn happy. But the interior is immaculate. Original Vauxhall floor mats, the original Philips Car 400 stereo, which also has the button for the code, which means the control system actually comes out of it too. And it has its own balancer as well. That's all on the left hand side, so I can change the bass, the treble, everything else via just these little dials. There is a slight knocking somewhere. I can imagine it's either going to be a drop link or potentially, just with the age of the car, could be springs. But it feels nice and floaty, so I don't really see much of an issue with that until I get to its MOT. Another point of factor, the handbrake only works on one side of the car. It works on that side, not that side, and you can see why. On its last MOT, it said that the rear brakes were binding, and I'm guessing they were adjusted, but not adjusted properly. So as it's been driven, it's got worse over time. The car's only done 3,000–4,000 miles every year consecutively, and it's on 123,000. I know a couple of people whose brothers and family members have had ones of these that have lasted 300–400,000 miles. It's a chain-driven engine. This particular engine would go forever in comparison to the one that's in my Insignia. And well, I can kind of see that it's a little tiny workhorse, and it's a really nice, pleasant place to be. Although very hot, pleasant. Another issue is when I use the washer jet, only one jet on each side works. There's two on each side, but I'm imagining because of the tree sap, they're kind of blocked in a way. They work, they clear the windscreen enough for what I need, especially when you've got flies all over your windscreen. The weird thing is the fluid that's in the car, I haven't had to change yet, but it smells like it's got vinegar in it. It's really, really potent. But hey, whatever. Maybe the car sat for a little bit, or maybe they never even washed the window. I don't know. But it's got a really manly horn. Listen. A really manly horn. I've always said with every car I own, it has to pass the horn test. It has to. You can't buy a car with an noise. It just, yeah, you do a bit of road rage to somebody and people will think you're a clown. With this is a proper car. And okay, maybe nothing like the Cavaliers are. I've yet to own a Cavalier, but I'm sure maybe one day I'll experience one. But this is a comfortable car. It's got plenty of adjustment in the seats. It's the pre-airbag edition, so you've got the rubber mat in here, which is rare. That you can put phones and all sorts in there, cups of teas even. And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cup holders, 2 ashtrays. I mean, we were smoking back in the days then of 98. Being an R-Reg, it's early 98. So this car is older than my Corsa, only by half a year, but there we are. Now I'm only taking this on for a little bit of a drive to show you guys about my latest purchase, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying driving this car. I've done a good 800 mile maybe in this so far, and it's just perfect. Everything electrically works, which is great because there's not really a lot electrical in this anyways, in comparison to a lot of things these days, I suppose. And the new cars are just full of electrics. And I'll even grant you this as well, the timer on this, it's accurate because it's going off the aerials and signals and what have you from whatever pole it's going to. But the timer is accurate on this, and it does change if it is ever wrong. Whereas my Insignia, yeah, my Insignia is 2 minutes too fast. and I've changed it before and it ends up being 2 minutes too fast. So the clock on this is probably even more accurate than the Insignia. As petty and as small as that seems, I mean, the one thing I will say the Insignia's got, which is a lot better than this car, is the fact it has air conditioning. What else can I say? I sound a bit like Jeremy Clarkson now, where I run out of things to say, really, and I feel harsh for saying it. And I'm not going to mention the coat hanger hook, because that's all that Clarkson used to say about the Vectras. But as a 25-year-old Vauxhall goes, it's not doing too bad, this car. And I cannot find another one of these as a 1.8 even without MOT. I mean, with MOT, I cannot find one for less than 1,800 quid. Without MOT, probably 800 quid. I've seen a couple with a bit of rust. But there's only 6 of these left on the road. There's only 6 phase 1s or pre-facelift Vectra Bs with a 2-litre DI engine. The DTIs, there's a few more of, I'm sure, but as a DI, there's not many of these cars left. There's only 6 licensed left in the UK, and that's got to count for something, I'm sure. But I reckon once I've cleaned a couple of bits up on this car, and I don't know how long this will take. I mean, a couple of people are going to think I'm absolutely bonkers for buying this whilst I've got a little one. But I had money burning in my pocket, and I was determined to get my Corsa fixed. And I seen this crop up for sale, and I thought, I'll give it a chance. I'll have a look. Went to Stoke-on-Trent, had a look at it. At the garage I bought it from. It was an old lady's car, had been since 2012, I think. She lost the service history for it. That was another reason why I got it so cheap. It had bold tyres on the front, cracked at the back, missing service history, and I believe the woman was giving up her license for this car, I believe, from what I've been told. So it has been just an A to B car for whoever owned it, and well, here I am now driving it, paid $760 for it, and I reckon I could get 2, maybe more for it, grand wise, not 200, heaven forbid. And a lot of people will say, oh, I said this about the Corsa, I said I could probably sell it for a lot more than what I did. The problem the Corsa had was it was automatic. It looked the part, yes, a bit like a max power car, but underneath it was just a car. And it had the auto box, a blown engine. I mean, I put, embarrassingly, I put 6 grand into that car. And I don't regret putting that much money into the car, because I had a lot of memories from doing the things I did to that car. But as a concept, logically a bad idea, mentally for my heart even, especially throughout COVID, it was a fantastic idea. And there's nothing like spending hours on end with mates fixing a car with a beer and hoping that it would still drive away afterwards. But if it broke, you could just go, oh no. Anyway, and then get into your reliable car and drive home and sort it out another day. That was the idea at the time. But I do love how this car just drives. Yeah, it feels old, but then it is an old car. And I just love its character. Proper, characterful car. I'm going to pull over here. Take a few images before we go. See, handbrake's on, but if I let go of it, it slightly moves forward. But it is what it is. It's an old car. Now, I'd also like to mention this as well. this car came with 2 original General Motors keys, and it has the central lock-in, which works perfectly fine. And it has 2 of these, and the keys are immaculate condition. They are, what can I say, they're perfect. There's nothing wrong with the keys work perfectly fine. They haven't been lost like many keys are. And I apologise if my head looks really shiny at the minute. That is because it's in the car off. I'm sweating. Oh my life. But the speakers work fine. Everything works fine. Put it this way, with especially the fuel cap looking so clean. The seats, the rails for the seats have even been greased. Somebody really loved this car, and you could just see it in its condition. And they've even put these little sort of speaker things, or I say speaker things, the little microphones here for whatever you connect your phone to. But like I say, I think this is probably the best buy I've bought. And if I can move it on after finding some history, I mean, I've already spoken to a couple of places to potentially find history for this car. Now, I will be making a video at some point of how to try and find history if you're buying a car that's like this, perfect, but with no service history. So stay tuned for that video. But in essence, what I'm going to say is I've got a number from when I went to Dickens for the Insignia to try and find some history, and they've told me where this car was first registered at. So I'm going to eventually take a trip out to them to see if they can find some history I could potentially have printed off. But then also I found the MOT sheets, which also tell me which garages this car's been to have its service done, or potentially have its service done. So it's had its MOT done, which I'm hoping, being that the person who owned it was an elder person, would have had it serviced at that place. So fingers crossed I find some. Now before we go, I need to try and reverse this away. And the problem this car has, in comparison to what the Insignia has, the Insignia's got reverse cameras. Now this car's got good mirrors, but the car is that curved you can't see. Right, I'm going to make a start here. Let's go. Second gear, there we go. And I put my foot down and it doesn't smoke that bad either. That's another good thing with the diesel. Although, it's not so good when you're sat still for a long period of time. Then it does start smoking. I suppose that's down to because it's an older diesel and doesn't like, 1, sitting idling, and 2, I mean, it doesn't affect the engine, but it just smokes a bit. And the fact it's got, well, obviously no DPF, and it's a mechanical fuel pump. Well, that's it, guys. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope you really like my new purchase, because it's finally put a smile on my face again. I'm sad to see the Corsa go, but all good things must come to an end, and I've moved on to something I would say is way better and more economical for me. And hopefully, eventually, when I do sell this car, instead of having loads of money put into it and making a loss, hopefully this one does need a lot of money and I can make a profit on it. Anyway guys, stay tuned, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Carry you home.